Good morning, and thank you very much to ISCMA and MODA Conference for allowing me to participate with you this morning. The conversation I want to have with you is the work that we went through to migrate our own supply chain into a cloud environment. I chose this picture because many people don't know what Microsoft represents. They think Microsoft is software, 365, or maybe they know us for LinkedIn. But in fact, I work for the device supply chain, and we produce and move things such as Surface laptops and tablets. We do Xbox, we move PC hardware, third-party units. Yes, of course, we do ship software, but a big one for us is now data centers. We're now the second largest cloud seller and user of technology in the world. And then recently, you may have seen a lot of information or sales marketing material about our adaptive controllers, because we're very much involved in what we can do for diversity and inclusion globally to make sure that everyone has a chance to participate with us in our journey on supply chain. In terms of device supply chain, in fact, we have over 42,000 active SKUs. We have 33 different exchange centers, repair centers, manufacturing entities, as well as distribution centers. And then we ship to over 1 million locations, 192 countries globally. And that's pretty impressive. When I was the logistics and distribution manager, I was responsible for 7 channels, everything from online consumers to small business to retail, enterprise, government, and the reverse. Online and brick-and-mortar stores represented the bulk of our sales in individual components, but the largest sales for us was in the enterprise space. And when we think about manufacturing, I have responsibility for over 200 factories that we enable from a tier 2 to a 1.5 to a 1. We're very involved in our factory operations. We get into the shop floor control systems. We help the vendor work with us to manage things in the way that we want for quality purposes. And we're constant consumers of data. Everything that comes from a shop floor control system, we want to make sure that we have access to that so that we can pass it to the next ecosystem partner. And the thing I want to first start with you is the journey since I've been there, about 7 years ago. At the time that I started, we first started shipping our first Surface units. And at that time, I would say we were probably not very advanced. They pulled many people into the China factory to help move the product. I was physically pushing the pallets in order to get them out on time, in order to make the launch date that we needed. And then we purchased, as many people may have remembered, Nokia. And when we purchased Nokia, we went from 23 DCs globally, all of a sudden overnight to 56. And much of that was to satisfy the phone network. And we integrated Nokia into our ERP platform. We made sure that we had access to how we were going to manage their product. And then 2 years later, and by the way, we moved a lot of factories around in order to be able to accommodate it. And then 2 years later, we sold Nokia. So then we had to figure out how we could quickly migrate out of those DCs, out of the factories. And then we decided at that point, we wanted to move to the cloud, because we need the flexibility and adaptability in order to be able to handle the constant changing business needs of information and technology. And we couldn't keep trying to prop up a new factory or shutting down a factory. It took too long for us to do that. So we had good transformation motivation in order to be able to do it. And it's interesting, as I stand in front of you today, one of the things that I would tell you is we would never try to sell to the outside what we don't try to do ourselves on the inside. But the inside sometimes isn't very painless. sometimes you have to go through the journey yourselves in order to be able to understand and have empathy for people in the supply chain ecosystem. So we went through this process about what we were trying to achieve. One of the things that helped motivate us very quickly is we had a launch of Xbox consoles. We were using a vessel operator named Hanjin, and at that time Hanjin went bankrupt. And unfortunately for me, everybody, all the managers kept calling us to find out where that product was. And what took us 7 days to try to figure out where each product was, on which vessel, on which container, and then we had to negotiate with the ports in order to be able to get release of that product. About 2 years ago, we had a similar situation where in Europe, several companies got hit with a malware. At the same time, DHL was moving to a new terminal. At the same time, there was a lot of weather problems occurring in continental Europe. And what we said is, not only do we need to know where the product is now, but we need to anticipate with predictive analytics what will happen, what disruptions will occur that we need to think about, and how can we protect against them. So this all went into the motivation of why we chose to undergo this transformation. So we went from connected, which is merely using information to transform from one factory to another, or from a factory to a DC, or from our planning environment into the factory. We moved into what we call predictive. I can now anticipate, because I've connected to all the ocean providers, to the parcel providers, but also to weather patterns. I can now predict with a very high level of accuracy when and where a disruption will occur. Natural disruptions, not all disruptions. But what we can do is I can quickly, knowing when a disruption will occur, reroute that product in order to be able to get to the customer. And that connectivity, or that network that I've created, this ecosystem in our journey, has helped us be able to transform and improve the information sharing. And our customers have now appreciated what we've done, because we can now project these messages to the customer and say, instead of reaching you at 10 a.m. tomorrow, I will be there at 1:15. And that ability for a customer to understand and receive those messages from us has been greatly received by the customer community. We're starting, but I would say we're not completely there, in the cognitive state. In the cognitive state is I have real-time supply chain visibility, including into my factories. And when I get there, which will probably be in the next 2 months, we will be able to transform the way that we use our factories, and I'll show you that in a minute. So what we've done is this digital transformation that we've moved to, away from EDI, away from Excel spreadsheets. We now move to API. We now moved everything to the cloud, 100%. We have trusted data that we can use as intelligence for real time, or as close to real time as I can get it, but most important, it's collaborative. I share the data with my partners. It doesn't matter whether it's a vendor, such as DHL or FedEx, or if it's truly someone in my own Microsoft universe. What we say is data is the new currency. Supply chain is no longer about just the movement of products. It's now about how you use and leverage information. As an example, I want to show you something that helped formulate us on this retail journey. We had a lot of things to take into account. Of course, for us, number one is our customer brand and our customer loyalty. And we have many things to thank for, but the most important thing, we would not be here if it were not for our customers. But the other things that we think about is, what are the influences that help shape our journey? So we have China innovation. We have, lately, regulatory and tariff concerns. We have next generation logistics, which is migrating and moving very, very fast. Intelligent systems, commerce everywhere, You can do anything from buy online, ship from store, buy online, pick up in store. Industry convergence, responsive product development, data security is probably another big one that we had to worry about. But this helped transform what we think about when we think about the retail experience. Another thing that we had to look at is who were our customers and what experiences do they wish to have. And so we said the customer wanted to be loyal. We wanted to make sure that when he was shopping in our e-commerce shopping cart, that he didn't leave the shopping cart to go someplace else. But of course, he had to make sure that the credit card information and everything that he gave to us in terms of privacy was protected. When we think about empowering our employees, we have over 110 brick and mortar stores. We were looking at whether or not there was commerce everywhere, and whether or not when a customer went into that particular store, they wanted to make sure that their product was there on the shelf and not waiting for them at some kind of distribution center. And when we looked at the intelligent supply chain, we had to worry about next generation logistics, responsive product and development, and regulation and tariffs. And then when I go over to the reimagined retail, many of the stores now do not carry a lot of product, and that's very deliberate. But it's all about the experience that you have while you're inside the store. And so when we talk about predicting your customers or knowing your customers, we said, all right, what do the customers want? How are we going to get it there? What is the gap between the in-store and the digital experience? If I go online and I see that particular product online, and I happen to drive by that store, I want to know in advance that that product will be there. I want to make sure that the delivery is a great experience. In certain countries, I have to worry about what we call porch theft, so I have to make sure that the product gets there when the customer wants it, not really before and certainly not later. And then we want to make sure that we optimize through the social and digital channels. When we talk about the supply chain itself, I said we have already evolved to predictive forecasting, and I'll show you something along those lines shortly. We've definitely advanced. I would say we're pretty far out there in terms of what we've done and what we're willing to do, but we're willing to share that experience with anyone else who's willing to listen. Now, because of the work that I did in logistics and distribution, I've moved over to be responsible for IT in our manufacturing entities. And I told you we have 200 factories that I count as my vendor partners in my ecosystem. When we started out here, we were what I would call typical. Every factory only talked to the factory that he shipped to. They didn't even know that there was an entire ecosystem behind them. And even the people in our management system really only talked to the tier 1 factories. They did not talk to the tiers below them. Each supplier, shop floor control system, belonged to that particular factory. There was no sharing of data because they felt, even back to Microsoft, because they felt it was confidential. And there was no involvement or engagement in that particular factory because it was a third-party vendor. So what we did is we insisted that we move to a spoke and wheel type of environment. The customer's at the center, as always. But what we've done is, because we are now digital, I now have all data flowing to Microsoft, and the deal that I have with the factories is all data moves back and forth between that particular confidential factory owner to Microsoft, and then we share it with the next party. So one person's quality output has now become another person's quality input. We've reduced the just-in-time environment of getting goods from one factory to another. We've stopped all the inspections that we're doing, that vendors were doing for quality purposes, and we're much better in our yield as we're getting out of the factory information. This movement, although rather simple, has been fantastic in the way that we're moving our product with a very high quality intent. We've shaved probably 50% of our total transit time, and I don't think we're done. In terms of stages of development, you can go from computerization to connectivity all the way up to predictive capacity and adaptability. And now I want to show you some of the data that we're using. Luckily for us, we have this tool called Power BI. And so when we take data, you can put all kinds of raw data into a data lake, and then you extract it for meaningful reports, metrics, or dashboards. And what's interesting about Power BI is it's an advanced version of Excel, and it's really cool. So I could click on a particular bar, and what I get to see here is, and these are actual Power BI reports that I was using in the logistics space. I was looking to see how much truck I was actually using, and you can see at the bottom of the screen the actual shipments that were involved in the analysis that I'm doing. And if I clicked on truck, I could see it's a little bit of a hyper ledger there, how much truck I'm actually using for a particular mode or geography. And again, I have all the real-time data there, and that has transformed tremendously the communication that you do amongst management about where your experiences are and where you're going. I have two practical examples of what we use for predictive analytics. I have on the left, I'll just walk through that one. It's a factory where we had assembly, component, genealogy, we had MES and environmental data. We moved to the cloud, and as a result, we were able to detect that we had a model, that we had a problem with chips that we were using in a particular product. The model predicted optimal patterns of how we should be putting that product on a production line. And as a result of using the data and the model, we were able to save 30% in yield on our production line, which was great. You never would have been able to do that before. Outside in the booth with Microsoft, you have a vendor called TMC and a division of C.H. Robinson. Also in the Microsoft booth, you have another company, PTC, which is using some of our technology in the HoloLens in the manufacturing space, and you have LogChain, which is using some of our technology to do blockchain. I encourage you to go to the vendors in the booth during a break, but one of the things you'll see here is this is a picture that we use to run our transportation management system. As you can see on the top right, it's actually real-time data brought in from our vendors, and then layered on top of it, we have weather and traffic patterns so that we can help with the disruption. And anytime that we have an anticipation of a hurricane or a tornado, we use our technology to be able to move the product around the weather pattern. The last thing I want to show you here is, okay, this is more of what we call Navisphere Vision, which is I can actually see in which container, which product it is, and then that helps me with my engagement with the customer so that I can appropriately predict when I will get there using both machine learning and artificial intelligence. The next thing that we're looking at, and we've only just started embarking on this, is blockchain. So blockchain's been around for a couple of years, but its application in the supply chain space is somewhat interesting. So when I was talking to the LogChain people out in the booth earlier this morning, they're using it to eliminate or reduce the financial burden associated with letters of credit, but they're also using it to electronically transmit information in the bill of lading arena. I've tried using blockchain in the logistics space as well. I used it to be able to prove, in a proof of concept, movements between my DC and a customer. This particular customer that we were shipping to kept telling us that we were late, and they would penalize us every time that we were late. My logistics people would tell us that we're on time, so I had to prove the negative that I was really there, because the money that we were talking about was around $5 million a year. This was a lot of money for me to be able to prove that I was getting there truly on time, so we agreed to move to a blockchain arena. In the blockchain space, you have smart connected data that is irrefutable. And when you move into that space, everyone agrees that you cannot dispute that data as you're moving through the blockchain. We were able to prove that our product was being delivered on time in full, and it was a great concept for us to do. I can see tremendous opportunities for us to embark on this further, should anyone be interested. The last thing I want to talk about is what I call value of good partners. We could not be in this space if we did not have a good ecosystem of vendors and partners that we work with that are willing to give us data, and we share that data openly with them so that we can all help to raise the tide together. And so what we do is we believe in going beyond technology into true value creation. We're looking for identification of opportunities into the digital supply chain space, both in our industry and other industries. We're willing to share our experiences and help others along that journey, and also learn from what other companies have done so that we can also work with our ecosystem appropriately. We're creating networks to predict and anticipate trends so that it helps us see around the corner, and we're connecting people and technology to strategy. I hope this description that I've given you has proved to you that there's something out there that we can all work on together to go through the digital transformation, and I hope that it was able to help you understand our journey. Thank you.